Markley and Tracy had been together for almost 30 years, but their marriage was on the verge of collapse. Against the background of difficult life decisions and personal crises, they are both trying to find their place in life. But treason never goes unpunished. "Oh, Markley, you're still the best at making me feel special," Tracy exclaimed joyfully as she enjoyed the moment. That was the good news. But there was also bad news. Just as I was about to continue, her compliment stopped me in my tracks, taking me by surprise. "Hold on a second. We've been married for 29 years. She shouldn't even recall what anyone else's touch feels like, let alone mention it during such a meaningful moment." "Wow, Markley, you really know how to surprise me," Tracy continued to praise. I lay there, resting my head against her leg, catching my breath, feeling a mix of emotions. I didn't feel the urge to keep going. Tracy stayed there beside me, also breathing deeply, and I wondered if she understood the weight of what she had just said. "Aren't you going to finish?" she asked, looking slightly puzzled. "I always finished, until tonight." "No, I'm just really tired, babe. You've worn me out," I replied. Tracy reached over and tried to draw me back, but I remained still. She leaned in for a quick kiss before lying back again. Normally, after moments like these, we'd share some time together and then head to clean up. But tonight, I simply lay in bed while Tracy drifted off to sleep. A few moments later, her breathing softened into the rhythm of sleep. Quietly, I got up and went to the bathroom to freshen up, then headed downstairs to my liquor cabinet. Having a mind that rarely rests can be challenging. Most people might not catch every detail of a conversation in that kind of moment. But I'm not like most people. Sitting there in my robe with a glass of Staley rye whiskey, I reflected. Was there something I'd missed in our marriage? Everything had seemed normal, if not better than usual, since we became empty nesters 6 months ago when our youngest left for college. Yet here I was, questioning things I hadn't thought about in years. Tracy had shed 20 pounds over the past 6 months and began dressing more attractively to showcase that she had returned to her college weight of 120 pounds and what she had achieved to reach that number. At 51, Tracy possessed a goddess-like figure, featuring 38 double D briettes, a slender waist, and impressive legs for someone of average height. She has always been exceptionally beautiful, and for her age, her skin is remarkable, a trait she inherited from her mother, who still looks fantastic at 78, if I may add. Even during the years she carried those extra 20 pounds, Tracy consistently turned heads, a trait that was evident when we first connected as college sophomores. We dated for 2 years before getting married at 22. She was naturally flirtatious, likely due to her stunning appearance, but I never had any concerns about her crossing any boundaries, until just a few minutes ago. Ah, crap. She thinks that just because she's popular with a bright smile, any guy will fall for her. That's ridiculous. A few years from now, she'll realize there's more to charm than looks alone, Rhonda Nichols vented to a colleague in the company break room, unaware that the person she was talking about was just outside, overhearing her remarks. 6 months earlier, Rhonda had been venting about her coworker Tracy Robertson, the top-selling agent at Midland Realty. Moments before, Tracy had passed by Rhonda and Carl Walters, a third agent, flashing a quick smile. Carl, who had been chatting with Rhonda, turned his attention to Tracy, which left Rhonda frustrated. Tracy, blonde, blue-eyed, and still turning heads at 51, had long been used to the attention. She took pride in staying active and confident in herself even after having 2 children. However, overhearing Rhonda's comments stung. Tracy had considered her, a 26-year-old newcomer to the firm, a friend. Besides, Rhonda was engaged to Fred, an accountant, so what did she care about Carl? Carl, the newest agent in the office, was in his late 20s, fit from his years as an Ohio State linebacker. Standing at 6'4", He kept in shape with regular gym visits and had a professional sense of style that Tracy had noticed more than once. The competition is on, Tracy thought to herself, determined to make a change. That day, she skipped lunch and drove to a nearby gym to sign up for a membership. Rhonda's words had sparked a fire in her, motivating her to focus on her own well-being with renewed energy. While relaxing in my den, my thoughts drifted. I found myself recalling the time when Tracy and I first met at a major Midwestern university. I was a math major, a bit of a geek. I wasn't unattractive and kept up with my workouts, but honestly, Tracy was like a goddess, and typically, goddesses don't date geeks. I recognized her, but we had never spoken. She was always surrounded by people who were eager to be around her. I had seen her at several parties and around campus a few times. Although I thought she was beautiful, I didn't see much point in approaching her with so many others vying for her attention. A few weeks later, I was quietly sitting in a corner at yet another party when someone took the empty seat beside me. To my surprise, it was her, the girl I'd noticed from afar. "So, are you shy or just mysterious?" she asked, catching me off guard. She wore an Eagles t-shirt, her energy lighting up the room. I was at a loss for words, struck by her presence. "Neither. I just didn't think you'd have time for someone like me with all the other people around you," I managed to say. "Don't underestimate yourself," she replied with a smile. "Sometimes we like a bit of mystery." That night marked the beginning of something special, and we've been together ever since, getting married shortly after graduation. I knew Tracy had more life experience than me when we first got together, but I didn't mind. I made sure to make our connection meaningful, and she seemed to appreciate that. On our first night together, we really connected, and I can still keep that connection alive today, even if things aren't quite the same anymore. Recently, we've been in a bit of a rut. Life gets busy, and it's easy to drift. But tonight, I wanted to rekindle things, so I surprised her as she was finishing up in the kitchen. At first, she seemed caught off guard, but soon we found ourselves reconnecting in a way that reminded me of our early days. It was an intense, meaningful experience, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like we were truly together again. As we shared this moment, I realized how important it is to keep making an effort, even after all these years. Tracy's efforts to win over Carl Walters truly began 2 weeks following the incident in the break room. They were collaborating on a split deal, which provided Tracy with an ideal reason to invite him to lunch. On the surface, it was similar to occasions when she had invited other agents to discuss splits, especially since she was not only the most senior agent in the office but also the top producer. Typically, the higher-earning agent would cover the lunch expenses. In this situation, she ensured that Rhonda was fully informed about the meeting. Being a consummate professional, Tracy handled the business matters first. After all, a deal is a deal, and a payday is a payday. Once the business was settled, Tracy seemed to switch gears and became Carl's new closest, if not best, friend. Over a bottle of wine, she learned almost everything about Carl, from his youth playing pee-wee football to his romantic life. He did mention having a girlfriend, but their relationship hadn't become exclusive yet. Throughout their meal, Tracy frequently touched Carl's arm and wrist while they conversed. Her professional forest green blazer was left open, revealing her crisp white blouse, which was snug and unbuttoned at the top, accentuating her ample chest. Carl could clearly see this. She made a point to lean in several times during their conversation, and after a while, a brief glance at Carl's lap showed that she was achieving the desired effect. "Men are so easy," she mused to herself. "He's mine, but he doesn't realize it yet. Once I lose another 5 pounds, I'll let him see what he's been missing." The private investigator I hired exhausted much of the money I had saved for a Hawaiian vacation this year. However, given his discoveries, it looks like that trip isn't happening after all. It turns out Tracy was regularly seeing a new realtor at her office, Carl Walters, as well as occasionally meeting a man named Fred Lazarus, and to make matters worse, her gym trainer too. The PI seemed extremely uneasy when presenting the report, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was also contemplating taking action against my unfaithful wife. Over the years, I've cultivated a diverse group of friends. One of my long-standing friendships is with an attorney named Martin Bolins. Like me, Marty is quite intellectual and somewhat nerdy, but I knew that if I ever found myself in a bind and needed legal assistance, Marty would stand by me until the very end. He might not be able to break a pencil in half, but I'd heard stories that he could dismantle a person's resolve to ensure his clients prevailed in their cases. We both agreed that Tracy should be charged with adultery. Since we're not in a no-fault state, why allow her to hide behind the claim of irreconcilable differences? Tracy initially planned to meet Fred Lazarus just once. Fred was Rhonda's fiancé, the same Rhonda who had made a rude comment about Tracy. Tracy wanted to teach Rhonda a lesson by subtly catching the attention of her fiancé, showing him a side of her that she felt was genuinely appealing. Although she knew she'd have to keep her actions hidden from Rhonda, Tracy looked forward to having the upper hand. However, Tracy found herself more captivated by Fred than expected. Their connection led to a few encounters, and Tracy began to enjoy the attention. She even thought about ways to see him more often. For her, it was all about the thrill of the moment, and she wasn't too concerned with the consequences. Then Darren Trimble came into Tracy's life unexpectedly. He was a trainer at the gym she'd joined. During a one-on-one session, she felt drawn to his confidence and charm. One thing led to another, and their connection became something more than just training. It was a spontaneous spark that neither had planned, but they both enjoyed. After her time with Darren, Tracy returned home, feeling a mix of excitement and guilt. She rushed to freshen up before her husband Markley came home, convinced that her busy day had gone unnoticed. The other day when I got home from work, Tracy was still dressed in her gym clothes, clearly having just finished her own workout. I was aware that she had started lifting regularly, as shown by her newly toned physique, and my private investigator had mentioned a few weeks ago that she had also become a trainer. So I assumed she was involved in an extended workout session that went longer than expected. She looked genuinely surprised, didn't even give me our usual quick kiss greeting, and quickly headed upstairs to take a shower, repeatedly saying she needed to wash off her sweat. This excuse might have been believable if not for what my PI had reported. By then, Tracy probably felt invincible and overly confident. Even though I was really angry with her, I kept my cool and had the papers served at our home on a night when we were both there. She was doing the dinner dishes while I was watching TV in the family room when the doorbell rang. She shouted for me to answer the door, but after seeing through the window that it was the process server, I calmly told her the call was for her and that she should handle it. She grumbled, opened the door, and walked into the living room holding the typical manila envelope, looking a bit dazed. "What the hell?" she spat at me as she looked at the open envelope. "How could you do this to me? To us?" "What about our family?" "You're just upset that I ended things with you," I responded coolly. "Given a little more time, you would have done the same to me. You don't love me anymore." I've realized that for a while now. I know about the others, or at least some of them. I began to choke up as I finished speaking. Tracy's face flushed deeply, and her expression shifted from surprise to anger. "You think you know something? Then go ahead and tell me. I'm listening." "Carl Walters, Fred Lazarus, and I reached into my pocket for a small piece of paper. "Darren Trimble." "Yeah, that's it." Tracy's expression changed once more, this time appearing devastated. She sat down on the sofa across the room from me. I could tell she was pretty sure that, at best, I had suspicions rather than concrete answers. Well, I guess if you had been more of a man, we wouldn't be having this conversation, she lashed out at me. I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised that she immediately went on the offensive. Having 3 men behind my back must have given her a significant boost in confidence. Excuse me for getting older, I sighed. Apparently 29 years wasn't enough to earn me a loyalty discount. Damn it, none of those guys were even alive when we got married. Tracy's eyebrows raised at that remark. Yes, not only did I know she had affairs, but I also had information on these men. She seemed like she wanted to continue down this path, but held herself back. I'll let you stay in the house until we can sell it. I'll let you explain things to the kids and your family, I said softly. I stood up from my lazy boy, walked to the hall closet, and pulled out 2 packed suitcases. She definitely wasn't expecting that. I'll come by in a few days to collect the rest of my things. Get your own attorney, decide what you want to do, and call Marty. It's clear you no longer care about me, so let's make this quick and get it over with. I have no idea what crashed and shattered against the wall as I was passing through the doorway. Although Mark was right, Tracy had been contemplating a separation but wasn't quite ready to take that step. She was carefully planning how to frame the situation in a way that might make her husband seem at fault. Tracy knew that Mark was well regarded by their friends, and it wouldn't be difficult for them to rally around him. Regarding their children, she intended to be honest about her frustrations, hoping they might understand her needs in the relationship. Tracy admitted to herself that Mark's actions had genuinely surprised her. She wondered if someone had seen her with a friend and mentioned it to him, not realizing that she might have revealed more than she intended in her own conversations. However, it seemed that Mark's life wasn't as affected as she thought it would be once she decided to move forward with her plans. She felt a bit unsettled by how well he seemed to be handling things. In fact, he almost seemed at peace with the situation. I felt a sense of pride as I exited the house with my 2 suitcases. It was clear that Tracy hadn't anticipated what was coming her way, nor that I appeared to be keeping everything together. I drove to a nearby motel and checked in, marking the beginning of Life 2.0. Tracy contested only one part of the divorce, but she did so fiercely. She wanted me to change the grounds from adultery to irreconcilable differences. Since she was still entitled to 50% of everything, the issue wasn't financial. However, I suspected she would manipulate the situation with our children and her family to make me seem like the villain. By keeping the filing based on adultery, I retained just enough leverage. There's no need for everyone to know our personal matters, she said firmly during a phone call one evening. Just change the reason to irreconcilable differences, and I'll sign the papers right away. I understand that we can sometimes be socially awkward, Trace, but this is bigger than just keeping appearances. If people look into things, I'm not going to cover up what happened. I wanted a respectful separation, but you didn't honor that. Tracy spread rumors about our relationship, and I heard about it from friends whose spouses told them. I suppose she hoped I would back down rather than let it affect my self-image. But what really stung was when my daughter Allison implied I was being harsh in holding her mother accountable. If that's what your mom wants to tell you, fine, I told her. But there's more to the story than what you've been told. I'm just asking you to be aware that things are not always as simple as they seem. Allison seemed shaken, and though it was hard, I let her leave without reaching out to reassure her right then. A little while later, I got a call from Barb, Tracy's mother, who hadn't spoken to me since I filed for divorce. We used to be close, and her sudden call caught me off guard. When I answered, she asked, "How could you say such upsetting things to Allison?" "She's devastated right now, Mark." I responded, "Barb, please listen for a moment. There's more going on here, and I'm not sure you've heard the full story. Maybe you should have an open conversation with Tracy about her choices." Barb took a deep breath, sounding conflicted. Mark, this whole situation is heartbreaking. I'm sorry for everything that's happened." The call ended quietly, and I reflected on how close we once were. She had been like family to me since my mother passed away. Unfortunately, these events created a painful divide. Eventually, the divorce was finalized, and we both moved on in different directions. As for me, let's just say life took a few interesting turns afterward. About a month following the filing of my divorce, 2 women from the university's science department each made separate trips down to my basement office in the math building to check on me. Despite both having been part of the staff for several years, I scarcely knew either of them, and likely hadn't exchanged more than 10 words with each during their visits. I appreciated their concern and mentioned that I was still somewhat puzzled as to why they felt the need to comfort me. I also shared that I had their contact information in case I needed someone to talk to. I must admit, they were both attractive. One was a divorced woman around 50, and the other was a widowed woman in her 40s. This kind of interaction became commonplace over the next few weeks, with women from various parts of the campus stopping by to ensure I was all right. One day, as I was leaving my office, the administrative secretary from the math department passed by and greeted me with a cheerful smile. "All right, Colleen, what's going on?" "Why is everyone acting so strange lately? Did I just come into some unexpected fortune?" she asked. Colleen responded with a hint of sarcasm. "You really have no idea, do you?" Colleen, a 35-year-old divorcee with enticing curves, sported jet black hair and green eyes. I had noticed the gleam in her eyes before, but this time I truly looked at her and realized just how gorgeous she was. "It's due to your recent weight loss, Mark," she clarified. She raised her left hand, moving her fingers and emphasizing her ring finger. "You've recently lost 120 pounds through competition. You've always been viewed as an attractive and kind person, but you were off the market because you were married, and everyone knew you were committed to your wife. However, with your ring removed, it's essentially open season. There might be many men interested, but few are genuinely good. You've now become a rare find, handsome, intelligent, kind, and single. I'm not sure who saw the paperwork, but it was everywhere on campus within hours. But the divorce hasn't been finalized yet. I won't be free for months. It's very flattering, but everyone wants to make sure that when you are available, they know you're out there. By the way, I'm resigning too, Dr. Robertson." Okay. You're so oblivious. It's adorable." Tracy realized that even though Mark was angry with her, he wasn't the type to gossip about his personal issues around town. She believed she could keep her own situation relatively private for some time. However, this turned out to be wrong within 2 weeks, and continued to be so until their divorce was finalized about a year later. "Are you freaking crazy, woman? I know you're amazing and you know it, but how did you let the world's sweetest nerd get away from you?" Marge Rochambeau, Tracy's oldest and closest friend, asked when she called Tracy roughly a month after Mark filed. "Oh, crap. How did she find out already?" Tracy thought to herself. Marge lived in Tracy's hometown about 2 hours to the north. Tracy had assumed, incorrectly, that she had at least a couple of months before she needed to inform most people. It seemed that a family member must have leaked the information, contradicting Tracy's belief that they, like Mark, would keep quiet. "Well, it's a long story, Marge," Tracy began slowly, trying to find a way to avoid sharing the entire truth with her friend at that moment. "Yeah, I heard most of it from Mom after she tried to avoid me, and then had a meltdown like a baby at Walmart last week." From the time Marge and Tracy became friends in 2nd grade, Marge had been calling Tracy's mother, Barb, Mom. One day, Marge bumped into Barb at a store and asked about Tracy. Barb began to stammer and speak incoherently before eventually breaking down in tears. After helping Barb calm down enough to communicate clearly, Marge learned the entire unfiltered story. "You betrayed a wonderful man, a great husband, an excellent father, and a reliable provider, just because he was getting older and you felt you deserved more? What about him, Buttercup? You're a bit older now, and I'm sure you're not the same woman you were at 30. Did you even consider that scenario?" Marge yelled into the phone. "I always knew you had a selfish, spiteful side, but I never thought you'd ever direct it towards Mark." On the day the breakup was finalized, Mark stayed in his apartment, had a light salad, and poured himself a glass of bourbon. Meanwhile, Tracy went out for an upscale dinner with Carl before returning to his place, a routine they had kept up for over a year. However, Tracy noticed that things felt different. She stepped away briefly to freshen up, hoping to re-energize the evening. When she returned, she tried to keep things lively, but after some time, she told Carl she was feeling tired and needed to leave. As she got into her car, Tracy realized that her first official night as a single woman hadn't turned out as she had imagined. "I have a brilliant IQ. I can decipher passwords in my mind and juggle reading 4 books at the same time. Yet I'm completely clueless when it comes to understanding relationships," I admitted to Judy Scalise, a longtime friend of both Tracy and myself, during our dinner on my first official outing 2 weeks after my divorce was finalized. I chose Judy because of our long-standing friendship, knowing that we could have an open, honest conversation without any awkwardness. I thought I had everything figured out, but it turns out I was just fooling myself for 30 years. So what's my next move? Judy was an artist, a painter to be specific, and I had always admired her unique way of thinking. At 53, she was a few years my senior, but maintained a youthful energy through regular yoga and a vibrant approach to life. With her deep brown hair and perceptive blue eyes, I found myself appreciating her warmth and wisdom in a new way. "I was hoping you'd reach out eventually, Mark," she replied. "I didn't expect to be your first choice, so I'm very flattered. But let's not spend tonight rehashing the past. We can catch up over coffee another time. For tonight, let's just enjoy each other's company and see where that takes us. Shall we proceed?" "Great idea," I agreed, nodding. I didn't realize it before, but it's true. You can't move forward if you're stuck looking back. For the rest of the evening, I tried to stay calm and composed, keeping the conversation light and focused on reconnecting with an old friend. I think I managed to keep my cool and enjoy the moment. We each had a slice of cheesecake and a cup of coffee for dessert. Just as I thought the evening was winding down, Judy gave me a thoughtful look. "I think we should continue this conversation back at my place for a proper nightcap, Mark," she suggested with a smile. "After everything you've been through, maybe a change of scenery is what you need." I'll admit, I felt a bit nervous about the idea. It had been a long time since I'd been in this situation, and part of me wasn't sure if I was ready. But Judy's kind approach and our shared history made me feel at ease. For once I realized it was okay to just take things as they came, without overthinking. The evening ended on a comforting note, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I could find my way forward again. When we arrived at Judy's home, she made coffee and excused herself to change into something more comfortable. I felt both nervous and excited about what the evening might hold. Judy returned wearing a casual, comfortable outfit and joined me on the sofa. We sipped coffee, chatting with an innocent sense of anticipation in the air. At one point, she reached over, gently took my coffee cup, and guided me into a warm embrace, leading us to her room. "Take it easy, Mark," she whispered, sensing my nervousness. "We have all the time we need." The moment felt both familiar and new, and we allowed it to unfold naturally. There was a quiet understanding between us, an unspoken bond that made the experience feel special. We shared a long, heartfelt connection that left us both feeling fulfilled and close. The following morning, I woke to find Judy already awake, her smile bringing warmth to the room. "Morning, sleepyhead," she greeted me with a grin. We spent a few more moments together just enjoying the quiet morning and each other's company. It was a peaceful, intimate beginning to the day, one I'd remember fondly. About a month later, Tracy and Judy met for lunch at one of their favorite spots. Tracy had reached out to invite Judy, and while they were close friends, Judy sensed that this lunch might involve a delicate topic, specifically her recent time spent with Tracy's ex. They'd recently had a second date, and to Judy, the timing of the invitation felt a bit too coincidental. The first few minutes were filled with casual catch-up on life and family, before Tracy finally brought up the real subject. "A second date, Judy? Really?" Tracy said, with a casual but pointed look. She took a sip of her drink and waited for Judy's response. Judy felt a wave of warmth and slight tension. While she had expected this topic might come up, she hadn't fully prepared for it. What started as a simple curiosity had quickly grown into something more personal. "He's actually amazing," Judy admitted with a hint of surprise. She smiled, thinking of how Mark had made their dates memorable. "Really?" Tracy raised an eyebrow, masking her surprise. Judy sensed that perhaps her high praise for Mark wasn't quite what Tracy had expected. Realizing the need to keep things light, she let Tracy guide the conversation elsewhere. Mark's name didn't come up again for the rest of the meal, but that evening, Tracy found herself thinking back to what Judy had said. She couldn't help comparing her new relationship with Carl, noticing subtle differences she hadn't acknowledged before. While Carl was kind and attentive, Tracy found herself longing for a bit of the spark she once had with Mark. As she lay awake that night, she realized that she might not be as over her past as she'd thought. Molly Hamilton was nestled on my right side, her arm draped over my chest as she slept peacefully, breathing steadily. After an evening of shared excitement and connection, we were both thoroughly exhausted, each in our own blissful state. Reflecting on relationships and the mystery of human connection, I can say that if I manage to live to be 100, I'll never truly understand women. A year and a half ago, my then-wife left, feeling unfulfilled. Now I'm moving forward, experiencing new connections, each one unique and leaving me with a sense of wonder and a bit of confusion. Molly is a physician's assistant at a local orthopedic practice. We met at the gym, of all places. She was fully immersed in her workout, focused and determined, not there to impress anyone, just working on her fitness goals. That's exactly what drew me to her. I waited until she finished her workout and went to grab her keys from the gym's cubbyhole system before carefully approaching her. Since my divorce, I haven't been involved with many women, even though several have shown interest in being asked out. However, something about her appearance and her dedication in the gym caught my eye. I introduced myself and invited her to join me for coffee and dessert one evening. She seemed a bit hesitant, and I noticed a change in the expression of her green eyes, but she eventually agreed. She asked for my phone number and entered her name and number into her phone. We exchanged smiles, and I watched her graceful figure as she turned and left the gym. As soon as she was out of sight, I called her. I realize this might seem a bit forward, but there's no time like the present to ask. "How about Thursday night?" I asked. She turned back, looking at me through the glass door with a wide smile, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "Thursday night it is then. I'll meet you at Laszlo's at 7, she replied over the phone. As expected, the rest of my workout went smoothly, and nothing hurt that evening. On Thursday night, I arrived at Laszlo's at 6:50, found a small table at the back, and ordered a large dark roast. Within minutes, Molly showed up with her long blonde hair tied in a ponytail, wearing tight jean shorts and a t-shirt that barely covered the top of her shorts. She was proudly displaying her gym-toned abs, which were definitely impressive. Her burritos seemed to be on the smaller side, perhaps a B cup, but they were well proportioned with the rest of her body. Additionally, she likely avoided attracting too much attention by not wearing a bra, as it was noticeable when she walked over to me. Since I was sitting at a high-top table, Molly had to lift herself into her chair while I held it for her, causing her braless breasts to bounce slightly as she sat down. She caught me looking at the movement and raised an eyebrow at me, so I responded with a smiling nod. We enjoyed cheesecake, sipped coffee, and talked for 2 hours. I found myself completely captivated by this woman, who wasn't much older than my daughters. I wasn't sure if she was as drawn to me, but she did agree to go out with me the following Saturday. We spent the day visiting a zoo and an antique car museum before ending up at a restaurant for dinner. Afterwards, we returned to my apartment, and the rest, as they say, is history. Looks like this old man still has a little something left. As Mark drifted off to sleep on the other side of the city, Tracy was meeting with a young professional she'd connected with earlier that evening. Their time together, however, didn't leave her feeling fulfilled. She found herself wondering whether she'd have to pretend to be more enthusiastic than she actually was. The moment passed, and she gave him a polite farewell before heading out. Shouldn't that have felt more exciting, she thought, as she slipped into her car for the drive home. A quick glance in the rearview mirror reassured her that she still looked good, but something felt undeniably off. A month earlier, her last boyfriend, Carl, had ended things, explaining that he wanted to find someone interested in marriage and family, 2 things Tracy wasn't seeking. While he'd been gentle about the breakup, it was still her second split in a row, with first Mark, then Carl leaving her. Tracy rationalized Carl's departure, noting their relationship had felt stagnant, and even she had seemed less interested at times. It didn't seem right for someone like her to feel so indifferent, she thought privately. As she parked in her driveway, Tracy mused that next time she might consider someone closer to her age. They might not have the thrill of the younger guys, but maybe they'd share more common interests that could hold her attention. My time with Molly only reinforced what I'd come to realize about Tracy over the years. From my early experiences before meeting her, I sensed a certain distance between us that I couldn't quite explain. She carried herself with confidence, knowing she could attract attention effortlessly, which influenced the dynamic between us. At first, I was captivated by the excitement of being with someone as striking as Tracy, but over time, I found myself wishing for a deeper connection, one that went beyond appearances. Occasionally we discussed these feelings in softer conversations, but I could never express everything fully because I cared about her deeply. Still, spending time with others like Judy, Kathy, and now Molly gave me new perspectives on connection and fulfillment. As I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling of wanting something more from my relationship with Tracy. 2 weeks later, I picked up my phone to hear Tracy on the other end. I was more than a bit surprised and somewhat suspicious. It had been over 6 months since we last spoke, and when I was with my daughters, they avoided mentioning her, knowing I wouldn't discuss her with them. While I wanted my daughters to love and respect their mother, I had made it clear that my relationship with her was over, and they had respected that so far. Markley, April wants to know if we can be civil with each other long enough to get through her wedding. It seems that Robert finally proposed, and she wants us to be there, but only if we won't make it a Real Housewives episode. Well, April hasn't reached out to me about this yet, but you can tell her I'll be the perfect gentleman, especially if you can remember to be the woman I once loved, and I'll let my oldest know that when she officially calls to share her news. April called the next day to tell me her news, and I gave her the same assurance I had given her mother. She informed me that Tracy would help her plan the wedding, and I told her to have the time of her life. I was more than happy to cover the costs. I'm not overly sentimental, but I have to admit, walking April down the aisle deeply moved me. My little frumpkin had left behind her dolls, silly songs, and love for the Muppets to become a beautiful woman, inside and out. The walk down the aisle took only seconds, but in those brief steps, hundreds of memories flashed through my mind. When I handed her over to Robert at the altar, I had tears of happiness streaming down my face. I moved over to sit with my family, settling beside Tracy, who leaned over and gave me a heartfelt peck on the cheek. She was crying too. We had planned a waltz for our father-daughter dance, and I thought it went smoothly. Then, Robert and his mother, Isabel, took the floor for the mother-son dance to a foxtrot. After that, the music turned more modern, and the dance floor was mostly packed with people in their 20s and 30s. I was standing by the bar for about 10 minutes, sipping a single malt scotch, before deciding to make my move. Tracy was slow dancing with one of the 30-somethings when I walked over and asked if he would mind if I cut in. He looked a bit taken aback, but Tracy beamed and grabbed my hand, deciding for him. "Don't you trust me around these youngsters?" Tracy teased, glancing at me with a sideways look. "Thanks to you, half the crowd thinks I'm a cougar. That young man you just sent off had his pride pressed against my stomach and was hoping he'd leave here with the mother of the bride." "If that's what you're after, I'll call him back," I replied. "But I thought maybe you'd enjoy a conversation and a dance with someone who doesn't think Beyoncé is a living legend." "Touché," she responded. "Well, unless you decide to stab me right here on the dance floor, I think we've handled ourselves pretty well this weekend, wouldn't you say?" I asked sincerely. "I'd agree, but there was a moment when I thought the bride was going to have a panic attack when you came over to me." Tracy giggled. "Yeah, well, it's been a few years since we showed much maturity around each other," I admitted. "But at least we waited until the kids were out of the house before we imploded," she replied. We danced to a few slow songs, and then as the music picked up tempo, her previous dance partner returned and politely asked if he could take over. I think Tracy was a bit surprised when I agreed. Allie joined me at our table when I returned from the bar. She sat beside me, watching her mother on the dance floor. Without taking her eyes off the scene, she spoke up. "Do you think I'll have to worry about men chasing her when she's in a nursing home?" Allie asked in a joking tone. I glanced sideways at my daughter, not wanting her to notice me reading her expression. Her tone was light, but her eyes showed she wasn't entirely joking. "But what about you, Dad? Mom tells me you go on dates now and then, but it seems replacing her is no easy task." "I'm actually doing fine, even better than fine, baby girl," I replied. "Your mother doesn't know as much about my life these days as she thinks she does, but all I'll say is that I'm not lacking female attention, and I wasn't aware I was trying to replace her. I'll cross that bridge if I come to it." Just then, Wendy Adams, an old family friend, approached our table. Wendy and her husband Earl had been close friends with Tracy and me since the kids were young. Earl passed away a few years back from cancer, and I knew that Wendy and Tracy still kept in touch. I hadn't kept up as much since Earl and I were the closer friends. Wendy, at 53, was a couple of years younger than me, and judging by how her dress fit, she was in good shape. I invited her to join Allison and me at the table, but she just smiled and asked Allison if she would mind if we went for a dance. Allison looked a bit surprised at first, but then cheerfully encouraged us to hit the floor and have some fun. As we headed toward the dance floor, Allison grabbed my arm, leaned in and whispered, "Come on, Dad. Coincidences like that only happen in movies." We danced to a few songs, then headed to the bar and found some comfortable chairs just outside the main hall to sit down. We chatted for a while, and then Wendy took my hand, looked at me seriously, and asked the big question. "Are you still in love with her, Mark? Because if you are, I don't want to embarrass myself by asking you out to dinner." I didn't see that coming. I'd always thought Wendy was close to Tracy, so it never crossed my mind to ask her out, even though she's always been, well, very put together. I figured Earl was a lucky guy to have her, and I was honestly a little surprised no one else had swept her off her feet once enough time had passed. I guess a part of me will always care for her, despite what happened, like an old habit, I suppose, but I'm not in love with her anymore. She doesn't hold my heart that way, I said, but you and her, I don't want to mess up what you two have. Wendy's take-charge attitude, one of her best qualities, quickly shone through. Mark, I'm no teenager anymore, and I've been on my own for 8 years now. There aren't many men who really interest me, so I'm not about to pass on one who's right here in front of me. Tracy let you go. How long has it been now since the divorce was final? 3 years? I know you've been dating. If there were a fantasy draft for husband material, you'd be the top pick. So no, I'm not going to lose any sleep over what Tracy might think about you and me dating, and other things. She blushed when she said that last part. Suddenly I found myself really wanting to be the one she took that leap with, so to speak. I handed her my phone, and she entered her number. Just then, as I was getting my phone back, April and Robert came out of the hall looking for me. April recognized Wendy, and they exchanged a few pleasantries before Wendy reminded me I needed to go back inside and play my role as the bride's father. I moved toward her, took both her hands in mine, leaned in, and gave her a quick kiss. "To be continued," I murmured as Wendy blushed. We went through all the usual wedding festivities, including cutting the cake, and Tracy was practically glued to my side for the rest of the night. I wondered if April had mentioned my conversation with Wendy to her, and maybe there was a touch of jealousy there. I have to admit it was flattering, even if it was 3 years too late. When April and Robert returned to the hall with Mark, April went up to Tracy and mentioned they had just interrupted Mark and Wendy Adams in what seemed like a serious conversation. April added that they even shared a kiss as they finished. Nearby, Allison chimed in, saying she had watched Wendy and Mark on the dance floor and noticed Wendy looked like a love-struck teenager. Allison thought it was adorable, but judging by Tracy's expression, she didn't seem to share that sentiment. After wrapping up the evening, only Tracy and I remained in the hotel lobby. Since she'd arrived by taxi, I offered her a ride home. She accepted, with a condition. I let her buy me a drink at the hotel bar. Given this was the friendliest we'd been in years, I agreed, and we found a quiet table. "The lady will have her usual, and I'll take mine," I told the waitress as we settled in. "It's nice you still remember," Tracy noted. "You're the only one I know who appreciates it that way," I replied with a smile. Then, out of the blue, she asked, "Are you planning to see Wendy Adams?" She immediately looked embarrassed, realizing how it sounded. "Sorry, that didn't come out right," she stammered. "I meant, are you interested in her? It's just, you seem to be moving on easily. Have I become a memory you're ready to leave behind?" I set my drink down, looking directly into her eyes, which were intense, holding something unspoken. After a long pause, I finally answered, "You know, Tracy, you were the one who walked away while we were still together. You've never explained why, but I would have been content to grow old with you." "Is that still an option?" she interrupted, catching me off guard. "Look," she admitted, "I made a huge mistake. I was caught up in proving something to myself, thinking that maybe I'd missed out or was losing something. But as time went on, I realized how empty it all felt. The excitement faded, and I found myself just missing someone who truly cared. If I could go back, I would choose differently. There's a difference between being wanted and being valued. I know that now," she said softly. And just like that, we were two people sitting across from each other, separated by years of misunderstanding and regret, but maybe also a spark of something familiar. The waitress returned just as Tracy was finishing her last exclamation. She paused a few feet away, unsure of what to do, so I gestured for 2 more of the same drinks. "Have you thought about dating someone your own age, someone who's experienced and understands life, even if he can't quite hit the high notes like these younger guys. After all, Tracy, as good as you look, you're not 22 anymore either, I pointed out. That's exactly what I'm trying to do now, Mark, she said evenly. We shared 30 good years together. Can you forgive my lapse in judgment and be mine once more? Please. Tracy's eyes were filled with tears. Before everything went wrong, I would have held her close, trying to make her world better. Even now, after all that had happened, part of me wanted to do just that. After all, this could be seen as a victory. Well, maybe it would have been a victory 3 years ago. Now it was simply a desperate apology. I shook my head slowly. First off, we had about 29 good years. I wouldn't exactly call that last year good. But this is real life, Tracy. There aren't any do-overs in real life. Come on, let's get you home. Wendy Adams had marked the end of what had become a pretty good second bachelorhood for me. I waited a week after the wedding before I called her. We went to a nice seafood restaurant a couple of towns away. She wore a fitted sweater dress that caught more than a few glances from men all night, though unlike Tracy, she didn't seem to notice. Her attention was focused solely on me. After a wonderful dinner and great conversation, we went back to her place for after-dinner drinks and dessert. She poured us both a glass of cognac, which we casually finished in about 5 minutes. Then came dessert. She stood up, took my hand, and led me to a bedroom upstairs. I noticed it wasn't the master bedroom and didn't seem to be used very often. I understood completely. She wouldn't want to have intimacy in the bed she had once shared with Earl. Wendy didn't need to remind me to be gentle. After Earl's passing, I knew she hadn't been with many people. They had been deeply in love. I approached each moment with care, starting with a soft kiss. We eased into each other's presence, savoring the simple closeness. Wendy's gentle smile and the warmth of her touch conveyed everything. We shared quiet laughter and affectionate gestures, letting the moment unfold naturally. Her quiet murmurs and the warmth between us filled the room with a shared understanding. As I held her, she seemed to feel at peace, and her bright, relaxed smile said it all. Each moment together was like an unspoken promise, rich with meaning. We took our time, each of us finding comfort in the other's presence. Afterward, lying together in the calm, we exchanged soft smiles, feeling a quiet contentment. Wendy's peaceful expression and gentle breathing made her look like an angel. I felt a deep sense of calm, something I hadn't experienced in years. Since my divorce 3 years ago, I had met many people, each bringing new insights and perspectives. But with Wendy, it felt different. I felt fulfilled on a level I hadn't anticipated, as if our connection went beyond words. With these thoughts in mind, I drifted off into one of the most restful nights of sleep I could remember. Although waking up in a strange bed was no longer unusual for me, something about this morning felt different. Almost like one of those lazy Sunday mornings back in the day, with Tracy downstairs making breakfast and the kids running around her feet playing some kind of game. But there was no Tracy and no laughing children, just Wendy frying up bacon, if my nose wasn't mistaken, and a pot of coffee already brewing. I threw on my t-shirt and dockers, couldn't find my shirt, and made my way downstairs without a worry in the world. Then I saw my shirt. Wendy was wearing it, just my shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows and only half the buttons done. That shirt had never looked better. "Hey, sleepyhead, hope you don't mind that I borrowed your shirt? It just smelled like you, and I wanted to keep that around a little longer," she said with a grin. "Well then, how about the real thing?" I asked. "Can a starving man get some attention?" She slowly sidled up to me as I opened my arms wide and pulled her close. She smelled like us from the night before, and I couldn't think of a better scent in the world. I growled. she echoed. We ate breakfast and talked about our plans for the day. It was Saturday, so we had all day to do whatever we wanted. We didn't talk about what I was going to do or what she was going to do. We talked about what we were going to do. We had a few ideas before I suddenly had what I thought was my most brilliant idea ever. "This might sound crazy, but what if we got married today?" I suggested. "You're the one with the genius IQ," she replied. "Whatever you think is best." And just like that, it was settled. I knew the local justice of the peace had Saturday hours, so I called to check if 4 p.m. was available. It was, which gave us a bit over 7 hours to get ready and put together a wedding party. I needed a best man, and Wendy's 28-year-old son, Aaron, was more than happy to stand up for me once I explained that his mom was the bride. He said he, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter would make the hour's drive and meet us at the JP. Wendy called her mother to ask if she'd be her maid of honor. With the call on speakerphone, I heard my future mother-in-law, whom I'd never met, dissolve into tears before managing to say yes. I then called both my daughters, inviting April and her husband, Robert, and Allison, along with anyone she wanted as her +1. "Think I should invite Mom as my guest?" Allison asked playfully. "Only if you really, really want to, but honestly, I'd rather you didn't," I replied. "She's been having a tough time recently, and I don't want to seem like I'm flaunting my happiness in her face." One of my closest friends owned a barbecue restaurant in town, so I gave him a quick call to see if one of his side rooms was free that night. As luck would have it, it was, so I booked it for our evening celebration. We both invited a few more people we wanted to share the day with before I went to my favorite jewelry store to pick out an engagement ring and a set of wedding bands. Tracy was stepping out of her favorite boutique with several packages in her hands when she nearly collided with Wendy on the sidewalk. Although they weren't as close as they once had been, they'd remained friends for around 25 years. They chatted cheerfully for a few moments before Tracy noticed the 2 rings on Wendy's left hand. "Oh my gosh, those are absolutely gorgeous." Wendy blushed, and Tracy's expression suddenly lit up with realization. You're married. To Markley. You?" Tracy felt a bit unsteady, and Wendy quickly grabbed her shoulder to steady her. "I didn't know. I'm sorry," Tracy apologized quickly. "We haven't really been spreading the news much. It just all happened so fast," Wendy admitted, blushing again. "Fast? That doesn't sound like the Markley I know," Tracy replied. "Have you ever just felt that things were so right you just had to go for it?" Wendy continued. "I mean, who would ever let a man like him slip away?" Wendy instantly covered her mouth, realizing how her words might have sounded. "I didn't mean it that way, Tracy, really. It's just that—" "Yeah, I understand, Wendy. It's all right. Believe me, I know I was a fool. Take it from me. Never let that man get away." "Surely there must be more than one decent guy out there," Tracy complained to her therapist, Dr. Ellen McForrest. "They all seemed to appear when I was thinking of breaking up with Markley, and then, just like that, they all vanished." "You're a smart woman, Mrs. Robertson. You have to understand that quality single men in your age bracket are significantly outnumbered. But you weren't exactly looking in that pool. Did you really think you could catch a rising star and keep him? Even if you're incredibly attractive, you had to know that eventually it would come down to building a life together beyond just physical intimacy. God, Doctor. Sometimes reality really does suck. I'm standing on the back deck of the home Wendy and I bought soon after we got married 10 years ago. We felt strongly, for many reasons, that we needed our house. It's a modest home with only 2 bedrooms, but it has a spacious living room and a large family room to accommodate everyone when our 3 kids and their families come over. Now we're grandparents 6 times over. As I work the grill, Wendy steps out of the house with a couple of cold Staleys over ice. She hands one to me and I give her a quick kiss. I can't help but admire how she looks 20 years younger than her 63 years. Wendy still takes great care of herself, even letting a touch of gray show around her light brown hair. But she can still turn heads when she dresses up for our occasional night out. Sure, we may be senior citizens, but we're far from old in spirit. In fact, we still enjoy our time together in the bedroom a couple of times a week, and sometimes in the shower, too. A little pill for me, some lube for her. Modern medicine has been a gift. While I loved Tracy deeply when we were married, I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with anyone but Wendy. She's captured my heart in ways Tracy never did. In a strange way, I'm almost grateful that Tracy cheated, because without that heartbreak, I wouldn't have found this happiness. I see Tracy every few months. She still looks good physically, but she always appears sad and apologetic. I think it every time, but I'm much too polite to ever say it aloud. Thank you. At 65, Tracy looked just as good. As she approached her car in the parking lot, she saw Mark walking towards her. She tried to get a little taller as he approached. "Hello, beautiful." He greeted her warmly, bending down to kiss her on the cheek. Tracy couldn't help but blush at his compliment. They chatted for a few minutes, mostly about their shared grandchildren, before Mark said it was time for him to leave. He knew what was coming next. "Mark, I'm really sorry," Tracy said. As always, Mark met her gaze, hesitated, then smiled slightly and left.